welcome to House Party. It's good to be back with you as we're continuing our series on Look Again, and we're spending a little more time at the empty tomb after the resurrection of Jesus and talking about some things that we find there that maybe will enhance not only our knowledge but also our experience in the Christian walk. And so this week we talked about what John saw in the empty tomb. And, we read the text from John chapter 20 where Peter and John ran together after they heard from Mary Magdalene that the body of Jesus wasn't in the tomb. And they took off running. They got to the tomb, and John was there first. And John chapter 20 mentions this, that John stooped to see. And when he stooped and when he saw, he ended up believing. So what did he see? What was the evidence that was there in the empty tomb? Well, first of all, we kind of got to go back and understand that the entrance to the tomb is probably pretty much characteristic of the tombs of that day. And they didn't have big gaping doorways that you might see in paintings or pictures of the tomb. They actually were quite small. They were 3 to 4 feet tall and 2 to 3 feet wide. And so they weren't these big openings into these tombs. It was really a small opening. And so you really have to stoop down to go in. John didn't go in at first, but he did stoop to see what was there. And I mentioned on Sunday that it kind of gives us a picture of a particular truth that we really addressed back on Good Friday. Palm Sunday. We talked about it on Palm Sunday. And it's this thing called humility. When John stooped, it presented him the clearest view of the tomb, but it came when he bent down. The word stoop there means to bend lower, to take a closer look, or to stoop down to see something better. That's what the word stoop means there in that text. And I was reminded of the verse in James chapter 4, verse 10, where it says, "Humble yourself before the Lord, and he will lift you up." So the scriptural principle, I think, is that the lower you put yourself, the higher God raises you up. And it's one of those paradoxes in the kingdom of God that we've talked about before. But humility has a strange way of giving you perspective. Humility has a strange way of giving you perspective. And when John stooped and bowed down, he could see clearer into the tomb. And I know that's maybe over-spiritualizing the text, but the truth is still there. That when we lower ourselves in the sight of God, when we humble ourselves before the Lord, he will raise us up. He will give us a higher perspective, a clearer view of things. Now let me ask you this for a discussion question. Can you think of an example in your life when you humbled yourself and God raised you up? Maybe he gave you a better insight. Maybe he turned things around for you when you humbled yourself and he raised you up. Maybe you got a better perspective of the situation when you humbled yourself before the Lord and he was able to raise you up. Can you think of an example in your life where something like that happened? And let's talk about that for a while. Another thing, topic for discussion is, after Jesus was crucified, it was 3 days before this resurrection took place and the empty tomb was there. Now, Mary Magdalene and the disciples, they actually heard nothing for 3 days. There was nothing. All they could do was really hide because they figured that they would be coming after the followers of Jesus after they crucified him. But imagine what they were thinking. They put themselves, they went all in for Jesus. They followed him and believed in him, lock, stock, and barrel. They placed all of their confidence and all of their hope and all of their trust in him. And then he's dead now. He's 3 days and they hear nothing. Can you imagine what they must have been thinking in those 3 days. Now we know by principle that God's silence doesn't mean he's absent. But let me ask you this question. How do you tend to handle God's silence when you're worried or anxious or afraid? How do you handle God's silence? Do you take it as his absence? Do you feel like he's forsaken you? Do you get terribly afraid or overly concerned? Let's talk about that for a minute. As we looked again into the empty tomb and looked again at the resurrection of Jesus Christ, let me ask you this from this message this week. Did you see anything differently or learn something new? And if so, take time and share that with your group, would you? Well, listen, that's all the time I have for you this week. God bless you and have a great time at House Party. We'll see you next time.